South Sudanese peoples. Salamat ya Junubin. My name's Amanda Al-Hajj Paul, and I'm going to do a three-part series on why I, a South Sudanese 30-year-old woman, have chosen to be a committed member of the National Salvation Front, also known as NAS. First of all, I would just like to highlight the prime reason for why I am a member of NAS, and that is primarily, and this is going to seem really feeble for some people, or a lousy reason, but it's because the founder of the National Salvation Front, I personally do not believe is regional or regionalistic or tribalistic. I do not believe that he wants a South Sudan to only profit and benefit the Bari, or by extension, potentially the Bari speakers. I think he wants South Sudan to benefit all Junubin. I don't think he has an agenda for the exaltation of Equatoria over Upper Nile or Bahr el Ghazal. I think he actually wants a South Sudan that works for our Upper Nile brothers and sisters as much as it does our Bahr el Ghazal brothers and sisters as much as it does Equatoria. And so I'm personally supporting a movement that doesn't seem to be pushing a tribal regional agenda, but is actually espousing a nationalistic agenda. And why that's particularly important to me is because I, like all Junubin, have seen the state of affairs that have erupted in that beautiful country of ours, and realized and recognized that actually, whether we like it or not, the source of that evil is tribalism and the rhetoric surrounding the tribal dynamics of our people in South Sudan. I've titled this particular video Uncomfortable Truths, because I think we have to be able to speak about the things that are really uncomfortable. So for me, it's really important that when I was choosing a political movement to committedly support, that I pick a political movement that is not espousing a narrative or a rhetoric that is built off this alleged innate divisions between the people of South Sudan, but is actually saying, no, we are a people who are constituted of a variety of peoples. So my choice to be a committed member of NAS comes from the fact that I am a nationalist first and foremost. My tribal identity has nothing to do with my national agenda for South Sudan, because if I think of my tribal identity as superior to my national identity, what I do is I not only disadvantage my brothers and sisters, but I very importantly disadvantage myself. Because if I sit there and only think about my tribe, okay, let's unpack it in that regard. If I think only about my tribe and building up my tribe while everybody around me is in the doldrums and in dumpsters, etc., it's not going to take too long before the eyes of the people who are living in squalor see that my tribe is living in opulence. And as soon as you do that, you make yourself target or enemy, public enemy number one, because all of the people around that do not have this level of luxury have nothing to lose for coming for you. It's just logic. So it's in my best interest to make sure my neighbors live as close to the same quality of life that I have as possible, because if that doesn't happen, then I've shot myself in the foot. And even if I don't live to see the brutality that may ensue because of that folly, my children will, or their children will. And I think that that's what's really strange about the South Sudanese leaders that we have at the top right now. They think they're doing this for their children, but what they're doing is really setting up their children for failure. Because number one, if you breed children to think that they're entitled to this stolen wealth, because that's what it is. If the country does not function for the benefit of all of its peoples, then those people who are benefiting from the system are actually thieves, because if they're living more opulently than the rest of the population, if they have access to more opportunities with regards to South Sudan than other people groups, then ultimately that is theft. We can unpack that another day if people really want to go into it, but it's theft. And what you're doing is you're young people who feel entitled. And the problem with entitlement is it makes people lazy. People don't want to work. And if people don't want to work, it means that they think that they're owed certain things from a state that they didn't contribute to building, and that everybody else should serve them. The problem is, if you don't want to work, if everybody else notices that you don't want to work, you don't want to strategize, you don't want to be productive, like I said, it won't take too long before their eyes open and recognize you become a target. So it is really important that we as Junubin, and particularly Junubin in my generation, as I said, I'm a 30-year-old woman. So if you want to take that, I mean, in 20 years' time, we will be the 50-year-olds deciding these things potentially. So I think it's really important that we have a candid conversation with ourselves. Do we want to repeat the mistakes of our grandparents and our parents? Do we want to do that? And I think that should be a no. So I am a committed member of National Salvation Front, or NAS, because what I think it brings to the ball game of South Sudanese politics is a freshness, a newness, and a sincerity about a national agenda that builds all of us, all of us, all of us. I cannot stress that enough. It saddens me deeply that growing up in the 90s in the UK, in particular in London, I was South Sudanese first. I mean, knowing which tribes I actually came from was a later discovery for me. When I was, a young child playing with all of these kids around me, I was South Sudanese first. And while, yes, once I became aware that there was a tribal breakdown, and knew that some of the dances that I was seeing were not actually from the peoples that I personally came from, that didn't make me feel less related to those peoples. And so from my point of view, the South Sudanese community in the 90s was very cosmopolitan. It was a vast mix of a lot of South Sudanese people from various tribes. So even though I'm Central Equatorian, I was mixing with people from Upper Nile, Bahr Ghazal, and other parts of Equatoria. So I didn't have a limited experience of being South Sudanese. And I had friends who were Equatorian, Upper Nile, Bahr Ghazal. I had friends from, because as you do, as a kid, you just play with everybody. You're not sitting there thinking, yeah, I'm not going to play with them because they're from that tribe or that region. Don't do it. We didn't do that. Well, I didn't do that. And so from my point of view, I think it was a very painful discovery when I got to my late teens and realized that being an Equatorian woman actually was not a beneficial thing when it comes to wanting to potentially see myself going back to South Sudan in a meaningful way in the next 10 years. So when I was about 16 years old, being able to think, okay, by the time 10 years from this point, so when I'm 26 years old, I would have preferred and desired to be in South Sudan, working to build a country after what I would hope at that time would have been independence, because we're in the interim period, all working towards 2011. And when it quickly transpired that actually SPLM was working for a tribal agenda and not a nationalistic agenda, even after the great tribalist himself, John Gereng, was killed or died, however you want that narrative to go, in 2005. In 2006, it was already clear that there was an embryonic the embryonic stages of what this monstrosity we have as the South Sudanese government or right now. And I am not saying this in any animosity to our leaders or people who support the system. I think it's perfectly reasonable for if you want to support the South Sudanese government that's currently in power. And I think it's perfectly reasonable that the elite and the power to do what they want to do. They are in a position to do it. Let them do what they want to do. But what I'm saying is, for my generation, do we want our South Sudan to look how it looks right now? That's the real question. With the pillaging, the rape, the murder, the brutality, the squalor, the economy that just doesn't seem to be managed properly, this this monogamous economy that isn't even diversified enough to be talked about. Like, what? It's ridiculous. And with the arable land that we have, and the plenty natural resources that we have, I do not understand why there is an obsession by our leaders at the top to hoard all of the wealth and the resources of our country to themselves, when with the tiny population that we had, we would all be living like Kuwaitis if they weren't so selfish. Emiratis if they weren't so selfish. It just does not make sense to me. We do not have populations like Ethiopia or Nigeria to be madly obsessed with hoarding resources. Let's just be generous, because we could give and give and give and still have truckloads in the stash, whether it be agriculture or animal husbandry or literally natural resources traditionally, such as oil, gold, uranium, etc. So I think we need to be very honest and frank about the fact that this obsession with going into government to make money, when if we just had a stable society, you could go into business and enterprise as an individual and make a nice living. So I am a member of NAS, and I'm talking because I care deeply about all South Sudanese peoples. I'm passionately in love with the variety of peoples that we have in South Sudan, and it's particularly important to me that we begin to have these uncomfortable conversations about unhealthy narratives that the colonialists spun about us, that are the root of why we see one another as separate when really we are brothers and sisters, because our story is so common. It was amazing. A couple of years ago, I went to the Pitt Rivers Museum, and it was such a beautiful journey of discovery for me, because it was like these people groups that form South Sudan, my people groups, the people groups of some of the other people that I was on the trip with. We all have this common story, and it's a powerful, beautiful story. And it just made me feel so much more proud of being South Sudanese, if that was even possible. I love being South Sudanese. But then it made me deeply sad that I can't celebrate that with all Junubin, because we're not all in a space where we can celebrate one another and our differences, and recognize the beauty in the various faces of Junub that we have. And it saddened me that, even though it gave me such joy to learn about my Zande, Nuer, and Dinka brothers and sisters, as much as I got to see artifacts from the Lubar and the Mundu people, it really hurt me that I enjoy that and I see the beauty in all of this, but there are many of my countrymen who don't feel that affinity to their Zande brother, or their Nuer or Dinka brother, or their Mundu Lubara brother, or their Toposa brother, or their, I don't know, Anuak brother, or Madi brother, or Kuku brother, or whatever. And I just think that that level of division in our community is toxic, and it's not helpful for where I think South Sudan needs to be going. So this is a plea to people in my generation, that we start to take the politics of our country more seriously, and we start to actively think, what can I as an individual do to build South Sudan, not just for me but for my children. And I think it's also an opportunity for the people in our parents' generation to sit there and have a long, hard reflection on the mess you have left us, because I am unfortunately having to talk about things that don't give me much joy. I'm having to talk about these things because the reality is there are near to no voices of people in my generation who are talking about these uncomfortable narratives that have been spun in South Sudanese circles for decades. So I think let's have candid conversations. And again, I must reiterate, the reason why I'm a committed member of National Salvation Front is because I actually think that the National Salvation Front political movement is trying to create a space where we can move forward as a nation of various peoples, which will take work. We are various nations right now, and what we really need to be working towards as a nation state. Now, I don't believe in the eradication of any individual groups. I believe that whether you're large tribes or small tribes, your difference should be preserved and should be considered sacred. But what we need to be able to do is maintain the vibrant development and recognition and practice of cultural rites and passages, etc., alongside the pushing for, I want the best for my brother who is from a different tribe or a different region. We have to be able to balance both. And the reason why I think we can balance both is because we're human beings. We are capable of a vast many amazing things. We are powerful and capable of being able to manage contradictions, paradoxes, and still thrive as human beings, because that is what we are created to do, to be the various faces of existence in God. So I just really want everybody to have a long hard think about what it is they believe they want for South Sudan. And if you find that your agenda for South Sudan is packaged in a box of selfishness, then I think you need to go back to the drawing board and reconsider, is me working to better myself from South Sudan really what I need to do, when actually I am more productive, more beneficial, and more valuable to South Sudan if I'm thinking about how I can serve all South Sudanese peoples, not just the people I come from. So I hope that's been an educative like breakdown of why a young South Sudanese person has chosen, you know, to committedly support an organization when at no point in my life had I done so previously. So my name's Amanda Al-Hajpool. I hope you have have some time to reflect after this video. And if you have any questions or thoughts, definitely just I guess you can leave it in the comment section, or you can hit me up on Instagram and we can have a conversation there. But I just really want to say that we should learn to love one another more committedly, more sincerely, from a place of authenticity, and not because we're forced or told to. So I hope this encourages all of my Junubian brothers and sisters that we are capable of loving one another and going back to a place like I experienced in the 90s, where it didn't matter what tribe you were, it was just a beautiful thing to be South Sudanese. So I pray that resonates with you all, and hopefully we can work towards building a country that looks good for all of us. So thank you for listening, and have a fantastic day or evening, whatever is your time situation right now. Okay, thank you. Take care. Bye bye.